Welcome, everybody, to another episode of A Better Man podcast. We are excited that you guys have decided to join us today. We hope that you're having an incredible month, incredible week, day, hour, all
Absolutely.
of the above. I'm sitting next to Dr. Kim.
Hey man, how are you, Colby?
I'm doing good today.
Yeah, you look good.
Thank you very much. I didn't
Kids out of town?
doing something different with my hair. What? Kids are out of town?
Not that that relates to you doing better. I didn't mean that at all.
No, nothing. I don't take it that way. But there is some reality in that. Sometimes when they are gone, you do feel a little bit.
I bet with 6 kids, you just kind of a little bit.
It takes us I don't know. I feel like 2.5 days to really kind of get to adjustments period of because you don't know what to do for the first 2.5 days. You're great. They're gone. You're getting a little bit of a break, but then you're like, how do you connect? What am I doing right now? Because you're just so used to running and gunning all the time. So it takes about 2.5 days, and then by that time 2.5 days rolls around, they're coming back.
So it never happens.
It never. It's a weird, wild world, but. We enjoy it, obviously. Who wouldn't want to have 6 kids? Who wouldn't?
I know. I'd had as many as God wanted us to.
Yeah.
That's fine with me.
I'm great with that. Today we get a chance to talk about ego.
Yeah.
And I don't ever have to deal with ego. I've never have any issues with that whatsoever.
No.
Never. As a man, I never have to worry about my ego or deal with it at all. How about you?
Well, no, I don't either. But Amanda and Nancy were talking over them, and they would differ with us a little bit. They would have a different perspective than we do. It's interesting. I was just kind of looking, I really do think it was Freud that came up with that term the very first time, and he was talking about the id, the ego, and superego, and I think in his context, the ego was the thing that was supposed to keep balance between the id and the superego. I think what's happened, what we're talking about, is where the guys go to superego, and that's where you're just, it's you. It's all about you.
It is all about you. And ego can be dangerous. There are examples throughout history of people who have allowed ego to control them and become something that they're not. And what you just said is it's that super ego, if you want to call it that. But there obviously, when we're talking about this, not everything is bad about your ego. There's some good things about it. We'll talk about that too. But for a lot of men, there's sometimes you don't notice how much your ego is controlling aspects of who you are. And we're just to share a little bit about that, talk about that today, so that maybe we can shed some light.
Yeah, and see if it fits.
See if that's you. Just so you know, the X, for y'all to know that a definition of ego is a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. That's one definition. I like this one too. It says ego is passion, excitement, growth, drive, creativity, individuality, unique personality, and reason. I thought those.
There's nothing wrong with any of those, but I think it's when we take them to an extreme or we take them too far that it becomes a problem for us.
So let's talk about that. How can having an out of control ego, or a super ego, or an ego that's more focused on negative than necessarily positive, how can that be destructive? What does that look like?
Well, I think for in a marriage situation, if it's all about you, if it's all about your work, things that you're striving to do, like we would say in that definition, there's a lot of things there that are good. But if you become obsessed with them, if they take them away, it takes away from your marriage, or it causes you to act a certain way towards your spouse that is not good for your marriage, then that's where it becomes dangerous. And I think it's all about keeping it in balance, keeping the good things and not letting go to the negative things or the things that are harmful.
Absolutely. Personally, I think of situations I've had in my life where I'm not, looking back, at the time, you don't think it's necessarily something that your ego is driving, but noticing it. And I remember a situation when I was working at a church and something came up. It failed miserably. It was on me. The responsibility it was my decision. It was my leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And it caused a lot of conflict because I wasn't willing to admit that, okay, I screwed up. I made that mistake because my ego was saying, hey, no, look at all these other people that played a part in this. This is what was wrong. This is where it was at. And it was like, at the end of the day, truly what it came down to is me. And sometimes with my ego, what it does is it doesn't want me to take responsibility for the actions that I've made, which is not true because it makes me want to feel like I'm better than I am. And when I admit that I made a mistake, I'm not as cool or as good as I want to be.
Right, you're not perfect.
Not perfect.
And I think we all have something in there that drives us. I don't know, that's how we want everybody to see us, like we don't make mistakes. And you and I both talked before, I think we've talked about it on the show before, that the mistakes is how we learn, and why we shy away from them or make them so we don't want to be a part of that is interesting.
Yeah, and not owning that and just being willing to admit that, hey, I screwed up or I messed up. And that's when ego becomes destructive, because it's not only affecting yourself, it's affecting other people.
Other people, right.
And they look at you and are like, oh, I can't, if anything ever happens, how am I going to come to Colby and tell him this made a mistake? Because he's not willing to own up on it, and you're not willing to, and you don't grow in that aspect.
You don't grow. People can't speak into you. And I think where I would say was probably the early part of marriage, I would never apologize for anything because Nancy would always apologize first. And so it just kept me from taking responsibility. And even times that I knew I was wrong, I wouldn't apologize first. I'd wait to see it, and I'd act like it was her fault, and we'd move on. Well, that didn't last too many years in marriage before she figured it out. But I can see from there the damage it did to us. And like in a marriage situation or with relationships with other people, we have to take responsibility whether we do something good or do something bad.
Yep.
If we've hurt someone and we can't acknowledge that, then that becomes a problem.
It is.
Then it puts a big wall in the relationship.
It does. And I think that one thing that's destructive, another thing or dangerous, we can talk about that too, it's dangerous about your ego, is when you're not willing to learn from the mistakes that you're making. When people aren't giving you when you're not able to receive the feedback and say, okay, how could this be improved? Because in your mind, you're like, I did it. It was awesome. We killed it. And then you have another perspective that comes in and says, this could have been better. This wasn't as good. And you're like, forget you. Get out of here. I don't ever want to talk to you again. How dare you talk to me like that? And say, do you know who I am? And it's dangerous when you're not willing to grow.
Yeah, I think so, and I think we can all fall into. I think it is. It's the times when someone says something like that to me, when I think I've hit a home run, and they're saying, "I think you may have struck out. Maybe you got to first, barely." And so it takes me a little while just to, and I think it depends who it is and how they're saying it too. If you did something and I was going to confront you on it because I thought it would be something that would be important to you, I'd try to say it in a way, say, hey, can we talk about blah, 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 what happened, and talk about it. But someone says, that was horrible, then you're going, well, you're getting defensive.
Defensive, yeah.
But even, I think, when we do get defensive, I've got to take time to look at it too. I can't just put it off on, okay, this person said that, they're a jerk, they said this. If they really, I felt like they were sincere in what they're saying, then I need to look at it.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Oh, it's super hard, because everybody has something to teach you. You just have to be willing to learn it.
Yeah.
Even if it hurts a little bit, or even if you don't like that person whatsoever. One of the books on ego that I enjoy is called "Ego is the Enemy" by Ryan Holiday, and one of his quotes is, "Your ego is an enemy. It blocks us from improving by telling us that we don't need to improve. Then we wonder why we don't get the results we want, why others are better, and why their success is more testing." And truly, at the end of the day, the people that I look to that have had the most success in their life are the ones that are willing to say, you know what, I need to improve, I need to get better. And the moments in my life where I've not received that, or not looked to ways of getting better and not taken that opportunity to get better, I've not grown. I've been stagnant in a lot of different things.
And I don't think, if you're not growing, you're really going backwards.
Yes.
I don't think you even stay stagnant in that situation.
Yeah. And it's easy. Do you feel like when it comes to growing and improving in our lives, do you find that, at least it's true for me, the older I get, the harder it is for me to want to do that? Because I start thinking that I really do people need to be coming to me for the,
do they know who you are?
Do you know who I am? I have some experience. How old are you?
Yeah.
You're 20? Well, let me tell you what I was doing at 20 years old. But as opposed to me getting the opportunity to learn from them, I don't know, but I find it is harder for me to learn from younger people than it is from older people, because I'm like, but then they have just as much to teach me if I'm willing to learn. But I'm like, who are you?
Well, no, because I think for me, I was always searching a mentor. When I got into counseling, a man named Jim Craddock was my mentor. He was my go-to for years until he passed away. And so I think that's probably true. What I've learned as I've gotten older and being around so many awesome young guys like you, that I can learn from these people, and I do learn from them. And so then it becomes more of a balanced reciprocal relationship, and I think it's much, much healthier.
Yeah. And I was wondering about that with you and I, like if you ever felt like that, because I'm just a little bit
Twice.
younger than you. A little bit.
2 times. I remember them well. No, a lot of times. Seriously,
Yeah.
I think we do. We have. I think you and I have a relationship outside
Yeah.
of our age because we connect. We have a relationship with Christ that connects us, and we have a lot of the same passions, and so we connect on those things. I was thinking there was a time in my life that I really thought at some point you get it, and you kind of don't have to go through all that stuff anymore. You don't have to keep learning. And then the older I got, I realized no, this is a lifelong process, and I think it goes all the way to the end of your life. That if you're not growing and learning and trying to be more of who God created you to be, you're missing out on something.
Yep. It is true. And learning is, and it is a challenge when you get older, I think, to naturally want to start thinking that you know more than you do and to stop learning and you stop growing. But you and I know both men that have had the most success that I look at and say, hey, they're continually, are good leaders, they're continually growing in aspect. I think it was, I heard a quote from John Maxwell, and he said he's 75 years old or something like
Probably,
that.
yeah.
He still does things, still learns from people, still talks about stuff. He's really, I don't know if he does it all the time, but seems like he's got a grasp on his ego to some degree. And he talks about when you're going through new things and trying new things, and you got to go through it, you got to try it out, you got to test it, then you're going to fail, and then you improve, and then you do it all over again. But he said there's a process where you continually try new things, but it's always trying, always learning, always getting better. You're going to fail, and that's okay. If you fail, you get back up and you do it again, you learn from it. And so often, I know in my life, there's times that I'm like, oh, I tried it, I don't really want to improve anymore. I'm good, because it hurts. It's hard to do that sometimes.
Sure.
My ego says, hey, look how awesome you are. You did this, you accomplished this is good enough. You can stop there. And I do notice the older I get, the harder it is to continue to grow.
Continue to do that. Yeah. Again, we don't grow if we don't, even though it's hard,
Right.
even though it's painful.
Yeah. And we have to. And it's something that we cannot forego, for sure. Is having ego, obviously, we talked about how it's destructive, but it's also dangerous. It's not just dangerous for us, it's dangerous for lots of different things. When it comes to work, when it comes to our family, how do you think that having an ego and having it become something that's out of control to some degree, how is it dangerous for our family?
It's interesting you said that about work, because people that I see in counseling, it's not usually the guy who has a bad ego or the high ego, bad ego that's coming to counseling. It's the people that work under and around that person. And they'll talk about, I can't talk to that person, I can't talk to my supervisor, I can't. He always thinks he's right, and we try to point something out, and no matter what direction we come from, he doesn't. So in the workplace, one, I think those people lost respect for that person, and two, you're not going to accomplish the things. I think the word humility is kind of the template you want to lay over our lives. If we are humble and we're able to listen to other people and we're able to take their feedback, that makes it, then I want people to come to me and give me feedback. I mean, I don't want them to think, well, he's irreproachable or unapproachable, whatever that word, unapproachable.
You cannot be approached. Let's just say that.
Yeah, you can't be approached. Yeah. And I don't want that. But I think that happens a lot in the workplace, and I think I'm not sure, I wouldn't analyze everybody, but I think it's either they're insecure a lot of times, or they're just jerks. Bottom line of that. Yeah. And so I think, and then when you go into a family relation, your kids, your kids put you on a pedestal for a lot of their life, early life. Yeah. All of a sudden they realize, dude, Dad made a mistake. Dad did something he shouldn't do, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you're not on that pedestal anymore. That's where I think learning opportunities come with our kids, teaching opportunities. Yeah. Because we can say, yeah, I believe this, and this is what I'm learning from this, and this is what I prayed about, and this is what I think God's going to do, and this is how you're going to see something different. Yep. That teaches our kids so much, as opposed to standing there and saying, no, I was right, and they know you were wrong. Everybody in the house knows you're wrong. And so again, it chips away at the respect, chips away at communication. Why are they going to come to you with something? All those kind of things that are detrimental for relationships.
So I got a story with that. I'm just going to be real. I was with the kids, and there was something going on. Life sometimes is intense. Obviously, there's lots of things going on in a man and I's life, lots of wheels and a lot of plates being spun. And it was just a really intense day. And something had happened that fired me up. And I went to, and sometimes I punch wall, like I hit something like that. That's sometimes it's not the right thing to do, but I do it. And I hit the wall harder than I thought, and I put a little hole in the wall. And Dr. Kim, all of the kids are there watching me.
Every one of them.
Every one of them. And there was nothing in my life that wanted to say anything about owning that or saying, hey, I screwed up. Even if they saw it, they knew I did it. They were right there. But I'm like, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to deny this until the day that I die. But I knew that it wasn't a good teaching moment for them. And I've had since that time to come to her and say, even that moment, say, Daddy's an idiot. Daddy should not have ever done that. Would you guys forgive me and move on, because it was such a terrible thing to do. But every part of me wanted to deny it, even though I knew there was absolute proof and there was no way that I could ever deny that. But my ego inside of me is like, I am not. You don't know what's going on inside of me. You have no idea how hard my life is, blah, 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 whatever it is. Yeah, you're
justify it.
Justify it. Pity party for Colby. And then, but at the end of the day, it was wrong. And I had to own that, but my ego didn't want me to.
No, you could have said, darn, sheetrock in this place is cheap, or something.
God, can you believe that?
I know, those are things, golly, I could just remember the things when your kids see. I mean, I remember I can't remember the specifics, but looking around to see if they were in the room or looking or not, and darn, they were. And it's like,
God.
Yeah. So, and we are models for kids, but I think too, you said that about what Maxwell said. Somebody told me a long time ago, as a Christian, you never have to feel bad about failure or mistakes if you let God use that.
That's true.
Because He's going to teach you. You're going to learn from that. So you failed at something. Okay, why did I fail at that? And then, okay, maybe that's what God wants me to go over here. So I do that. But it's a process of learning and growing.
It is. And so much of what we're talking about is obviously how ego is destructive, but we're going to get to, okay, here's some things that you can do to overcome that, and here's some great points. And what you're saying, having God really orchestrate so much of who you are in your life and what you're doing, and filter out some of that stuff is absolutely important. We all want to be the absolute best of who we are, and we want to continually get better, and the potential, the absolute best that you're capable of, that's the metric that we want to measure against. But when it comes to ego, we don't want to measure necessarily how good we are, how bad. We want to just to know that we're done. We're done. We did the best we could.
Yeah.
We don't want to continually measure against that. And I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it.
I think it is. I think when I was thinking back when I went into ministry, there were all the years preceding from the time I was 12 years old when I felt called by God till I gave in at 34, that I kept telling God that I knew better than Him, that I needed to be the best businessman or the best this, and I was just I would push back on that, and I always had that nagging at me the whole time until I said, okay, I surrender. I'm going to do what you want me to do, and then it was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this earlier?
Yep.
Because that's what I was designed to be. And I think for us as guys, once we figure out what God wants us to do, and that doesn't always mean a career, but who He wants us to be. It's about who we are to the people around us, to the people that know us, to the people that love us, the people we love. That's what's really the important thing. And if we're that person, then I think our ego stays in check and can be positive in those relationships.
So true. An example of that is we had an event here not too long ago for our ministry, for the Engaged Life ministry, and I got done with it, and I'm in a funk. I come home, and it's been a long week, been a long day, and I come home kind of in this funk after the event, and I'm just like, what is going on? And I'm driving around fortunately I was by myself for a little bit, and I'm like, what's going on? And in my mind, what had been going on is, and it had to do with ego, is I was looking at what other people had, and specifically because at the event we had people come that are mentors and help invest in some engaged couples, and so some of these guys are successful in my opinion, like they've done well with their life. And I start comparing with my ego and say, oh, look how good they are, look how great they are. I need to have those things. I need to be just as good as they are. I need to be able to do with it. And when I'm reading this, your potential, the absolute best that you're capable of, that's the metric to measure against. I'm measuring myself against these people that are not me, that are doing something completely different. But my ego says I need to be as good as they are. I need to be better than they are. And it really put me in a funk for and I finally had to realize what it was and work through it. But I have a hard time sometimes measuring myself against myself and measuring against other people and what they have. And my ego says I want to be the best. I want to be better than they are. And that's not possible all the time.
No, but I think our culture lends that way. I think growing up in school, the kid that gets straight A's, or you make a good grade and you get accolades, or there's always, it's kind of driven that way for us too. So I think it goes back to being the best of who God created me to be and not worrying about the other things. Now, that's not easy to do, but I think that's my goal, is to do that. Just, okay, you do today what God wants you to do, and leave the rest to him. Exactly. And if he grows your platform, if he gives you 1,000 more Instagram followers or something like that, fine. But the goal is to be who he created you to be and to live that out like he wants you to. And that takes work.
It does. It takes a lot
because
of work.
There's so many things in life that pull against that.
Oh, man.
You know, just all the distractions. And again, a lot of those things aren't bad. It's just we don't put them in the right priority.
That's so good. And you're talking about hard work, and just to talk about that too, it makes me think about passion and how much passion plays a role in what we do. I know a lot of people, myself included, that will start off in something that they feel like God is calling them to do, and they're passionate about it. This is like, this is great, and it's fueling who they are. It's fueling some of that ego. It's like, look how awesome I am. I'm doing something crazy for God. We're going to do all these amazing things. We're going to blow this up. I've done that as well. I'm like, this is going to be the biggest thing ever in the whole world. And then when it comes to it, all of a sudden things start going the way that you want to. Yeah. And you realize very quickly that it's purpose that is driving you, not necessarily the passion. It's the critical work that you will do that will require your deliberation and consideration. It's the work that you're starting to put that nobody's ever going to see you do. The time that you're going to put that nobody ever wants to do. That doesn't fuel that ego part of you that does it. But how much of that do you see when it comes to your life or ministry? How many people are starting off on passion, but then they realize, oh man, and they quit because it's too hard?
I think that happens. And I think, like when we started Awesome Marriage, I was on a high with that. And then you kind of level off, and then you kind of be, okay, because people were saying, gosh, this is so great. You're going to be having conferences all around the world. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Although I really didn't want to go do that, but I thought it was cool. And so then you kind of level off, okay, but is that where God wants us to go? Yeah. Is this how do I get my passions in order so they're focused on God and not getting ahead of him? Absolutely. I think my tendency in those things,
I like that. Got ahead of him.
You get excited, and I think God understands that. He's, I think the church that you and I go to, when they started multiple campuses, and they went to a city where it just bombed, and they pulled out.
I went to that campus.
You did.
When we first got married, that was our honeymoon. We went there, and went to service there.
Yeah.
And then a year later, it bombed.
And it was gone. But what I think the leaders of the church said was, we learned from that, and now we're going to go back in, and we're going to do it different, and this is how we're going to do it. And so I think it's, again, letting God work within your failures too, and not just burying yourself in that.
Yeah, it's understandable, because and so much of what you're saying there is, you learned, okay, who am I really playing for at this point in time? Am I playing to make Dr. Kim as awesome as possible as it can be, which is an understandable feeling. I wanted the same thing for me.
Sure.
But then you start realizing, okay, I'm really, it's all about God and what He's doing in my life. And there's a quote by soccer coach Tony Adams. He says, play for the name on the front of the jersey, and they'll remember the name on the back of the jersey.
I love that. That's
Isn't that
so
good?
Cool.
So
that is
thinking of what you're doing in Awesome Marriage, you're playing for God, and people are going to remember, when you're doing that, they're going to remember what you're doing because of what you did for God and the lives that were changed because of Awesome Marriage.
And that's what you want.
That's what you want.
That's what you don't really. I think we can all get caught up in, that'd be nice to be the most popular whatever leader there is. But it's not really about that. And I think that's where, as guys, it's hard sometimes, whether you're in business, whether you're in ministry or whatever, wanting to do our best, wanting to do everything God wants us to do, but keeping the perspective of, the name on the front.
Yeah. And that's whether you're in ministry, you're in business, you're working for yourself, whatever it might be. Is who are you doing it for? And if you're trying to build your reputation, then you're probably you need to check your ego a little bit right now, especially if you believe in Jesus and that's you're a Christian. You believe that what is it you're playing for right now? Who are you playing for?
Yeah, and that's a fine line sometimes,
because
you want to be known for be a hard worker, that this person can get things done. There's a lot of those things you want people to see in you. It's got to be, though, in the context of what God's having you do.
Exactly. It's
just hard to grab sometimes.
It is. It is a challenge, but it's what we're talking about today. Hopefully, they're giving some examples of things of how to improve on some of that. Great examples of men that have dealt with ego and have had failed miserably because of that. One of those, because I always learn from other people in history, and these are men that you guys can look up and read about as well if you want to. One of those is John DeLorean. Do you remember him?
Yeah, the DeLorean.
The DeLorean car that was Back to the Future, made popular because of that. A lot of the reasons that the company ended up failing is because of his approach to how he was taking control of the business, and he didn't have a lot of accountability. It's an interesting, it's fascinating of what could have been and what did not, because of how his ego controlled so much of the direction that he was trying to take the company.
Interesting.
And learning. So if you want some great examples of ways of he's a great example. Read about John DeLorean, and then also Howard Hughes, who pretty much was brilliant, but because of his out of control ego, also literally burnt what he had created down to the ground, because he couldn't accept feedback, he couldn't accept responsibility, and he constantly passed some of the things out. So a couple people there to look at.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot of examples like that in a lot of different areas. Some of them we don't probably even hear about.
Yeah.
You know, I've always liked that movie about John Paul Getty, and I can't think of the movie, but the quote in it where the reporter's saying how much money is enough from this multi-billionaire, whatever, and he said more. And then you look at his life, and it was a train wreck outside of it. Relationships, all that kind of stuff was a train wreck. So his focus was on him being the richest man in the world at the expense of everything that I think we would say is important.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think if you're not learning from other people's examples of how they failed, and that's what I would like about the history part of it, is then you're missing out on things to say, how can I change? How can I improve? A great example of a person that did it well and understood how to balance that ego is Abraham Lincoln. And if you want a great book, it's called Team of Rivals. And it talks about how this man, it's amazing how he was the president of the United States, but he was able to control his ego in a very magnanimity? I can't ever say it right. He was magnanimous is the best way to say it, and just put other people first and took care of their needs first, even though it could have been easy for him to push his ego. And he led so well because of that, and helped the country overcome one of the biggest, greatest crises probably that we've had to go through as a nation, and led through them well. So great example of someone who was able to push down the ego in a negative way and really grow in a lot of different things in the country.
Another one would be Jesus.
Yeah,
when you think about that, seriously, he steps out of heaven down here with us, whatever we are.
Yep.
And then Satan tempts him, well, you can have all this and you can have all that and all this kind of stuff. He can even turn water into wine. He could make the best wine ever. He can't have a wine, or it could have been Jesus wines, and it would be the top wine everywhere.
No one would ever touch it.
Nobody would ever touch it. But that wasn't his mission. His mission was to love people, care for people, and ultimately to die for us. And so I think his model of how you stay focused on what your mission is, how you love people in the midst of this, and he had more power than anybody.
Yeah.
But he controlled it, and he used it always for good and to help other people.
That's a great, He's a great example. Obviously, probably the best example of how to control an ego from lots of different.
Yeah, because talk about somebody that could have had it.
He could have had everything he wanted.
The human side of him, I'm sure, would have wanted that. Yeah.
So as we're finishing up here, wrapping up, just some ways of some next steps, basically, towards people that maybe want, some of us, and I have the same tendencies, that we're struggling with maybe some negative aspects of the ego that we need to improve. And granted, we know that there's great things about ego, and we just talked about those. So we're just talking specifically for the negative aspects. And one of those things is a good sign that you maybe have an ego out of control in some ways is relationships.
Yeah.
And how are people responding to you?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things I think you want to get feedback from them, from your spouse, from a good friend. And so I think it's a lot how you go to them. Just if you go to them and say, hey, I watch this podcast, some things hit me and I'm struggling. Is my ego a problem? Can you give me some feedback here? Because I really want to grow. And if you come like that, I think people are going to give you feedback. If you say, I don't have a bad ego, do I? Well, no, they're going to say, no, you don't.
You are such a joy. I hate that guy.
Yeah. And then they'll walk away going, I missed my chance. Why did I miss my chance? And so you want to give them that opportunity and then listen to that. And then I would say, as you're searching yourself, as you're getting that information, you take it before God and say, okay, God, change what you want to change. these are some areas that I know are causing a problem, and I need to change those. I need your help to change them.
And he'll reveal those to you
Absolutely.
in ways that you probably don't want to always have to reveal, but they will reveal.
And God's good. He's not going to dump it all on you once. He may say this and this and continue to work on you, because really, he continues to work on me, and I've been a follower of his for a long time. It's not like I got it at one time.
Absolutely. That leads us to the next point, is like the next thing is, are you improving?
Yeah.
Have you just been like, I've got it all figured out. I don't need any help. I'm the best at what I'm doing. I don't need to improve at all. That's a good indication. Okay, maybe you have an ego that's a little bit out of control.
Yeah. I think we have to always know that we need to do better, no matter where we are, no matter what level we've reached. And it may be that you've reached the top of your company and you're president and there's nowhere else to go in that. But then it's like, I've got power in this company now. What can I do to help the employees? What can I do? Put some programs in that have never been here before. They're going to be good for people. And God may lead you to things like that. So, there's, wherever you are, is what I really wanted to say, is there's going to always be room for improvement and growth.
Absolutely. And
for you and for those around you.
And some of the best leaders we know that we're aware of have always improved. No matter how old they are, they're always getting better, always trying to learn new things.
Yep.
Third is a good indication that your ego may be out of control is like, you don't want to fail.
Yeah.
Because failure necessarily brings out things that you have to improve upon, things that you're not doing well, and then you can easily, another aspect of that is like you start casting blame on other people. You don't take responsibility because you don't like the failure aspect. So it's got to be somebody else's fault, not ever your fault. And that was when you can really start noticing, and that goes back to the relationship aspects, to improving, like it all kind of culminates there a little bit. So those are three good indications. Okay, maybe I've got an ego that needs to be in check. Need some questions.
And just kind of let God kind of mold that into something that's really so much better for you. And if it's better for you, it's going to be better for the people around you.
And if you're not one of those that, hey, I really don't have a relationship with God, that's not something that I'm looking for right now, fantastic. But find people. There's still people out there that you can have those conversations with and say, hey, here's where I think I am at. Here's what's going on. Can you give me honest, open, like you said earlier, great way of learning and growing so that you can start getting your ego under control.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure, Dr. Kim.
Good.
We've had so much. It's such a great topic. I would love to talk more about it. And if you have questions, you can obviously always reach out to us.
Absolutely.
And do that. And then we'll have some good follow-up questions after this for you guys. If you're in a group of men, I would encourage that community to have and you'll some questions from this that you guys can get together and maybe ask yourself and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Is this an area that I need some help in? Yeah, the way we're going to grow hopefully from just by watching this, but to really grow, what if you get 3 or 4 guys together and you all kind of on each other about our egos and maybe you guys hold each other accountable for some things you're doing. You see so much growth out of there. Plus you become closer to those guys and that's great. We all need close guy friends. You do. And you need community. Yeah. And one thing with ego, if it's out of control, you don't want to be around any other people because you don't want somebody that has the potential to be better than you or challenge you in some area. And so that's something we would encourage. You got to have community. Push through that I don't want to do this because I'm so awesome. Push through that to have that community. Yeah, absolutely. Good. We appreciate you guys listening today, watching. Thank you guys for taking the time. And as always, we enjoy sharing this with you and look forward to hearing from you. Like we say every week, Dr. Kim, don't be an okay man. Be a better man. See you guys next month. See ya.